Hey, hey, hey. Time for another out-of-this-world story from rSpace. What do you do when your spouse becomes suddenly interested in free-spirited college students and overpriced yarn? Today on rSpace, spoiler alert, it's not about her artistic expression, and it's so much more than a new hobby. My wife used my money to cheat with a younger man, so I cut her off and exposed her in front of her families. I don't really know where to start with this. I'm still reeling. It's crazy how a seemingly perfect life can turn on your head in an instant. Anyway, I guess it's my turn to share my tale here. I, 38 male, have been happily married to my wife, 37 female, for the past 15 years, and I thought we had a pretty good thing going. We were high school sweethearts. I was your stereotypical nerdy Asian kid, and she was tall and blonde. She wasn't one of the popular kids, but she was friendly, so she was generally well liked. She's always been an artistic type, a free spirit, and that's what drew me to her. We started dating shortly before graduation. I went off to college and she went to art school, and somehow through that, we made it work. Even though we were both broke college students, we were happy together. I got my first job soon after leaving college, and I was immediately making more money than I'd ever seen in my life. She was still experimenting with different art mediums and trying to discover what would make her a big hit. One week it'd be painting, another week she was into sculpting. There were a couple of months where she was trying to be the next big indie musician, but I promised I'd have her back until her art career took off, and did my darndest to support her through it all. Soon after I got my first job, we got married. At the time, I had no reason to fear that she was a gold digger. After all, we'd started dating long before I'd started making any money. It felt like a betrayal just to consider the thought that she was using me as an easy ticket to a luxurious lifestyle. Sure, I could prove it now, but I sure couldn't back then. I make a lot of money from my job. I'm a senior software engineer at one of the biggest companies in the country. I won't say which, but you probably used one of our products before. I also run a freelance consulting service. Altogether, I usually hit the lower end of 7 figures a year, so money really isn't an issue. She wasn't working exactly. If you asked her, she'd say she was working, but she really just made these novelty crochet animals. They were cute, she's really good at what she does, but no one bought them. She was convinced that they'd eventually start selling like crazy. Call me a bad husband, but I knew that nobody honestly wanted to buy them. Even our family members made excuses anytime she tried to push one of them to make a purchase. But the little woolly critters all over our apartment were her passion, and it made me happy to see her make them. So I was the sole breadwinner. I know what you might be thinking, but I swear it didn't bother me too much. I made all the money, and she got all the money she needed to fill our house up with knitted ducks and monkeys. By the way, did you guys know yarn is expensive? And apparently, there's a difference between steel, bamboo, and aluminum crochet hooks, and she just needed to have them all. Crochet gets really expensive, but I didn't care. I was just glad to see her smile. That's how much I loved this woman. At the end of the day, it's not like her crochet habit would be the reason we couldn't pay off the mortgage. I also made sure she was comfortable. She drove a nice car and wore the nicest clothes and jewelry. My work keeps me busy most of the time, but I always found time to take her out on dates to her favorite restaurants. Over the years, she started to develop expensive tastes, so none of this was cheap. Well, I recently noticed some changes in her behavior. She had always been an attentive wife, listening when I talked about my day, preparing my favorite meals, and showing little acts of kindness, like giving me a massage when my shoulder issues acted up. I reciprocated these acts as well. I didn't always have a lot of free time because of my job and my business, but I made a conscious effort to go out of my way to be sweet to her too. Which is why it was so weird when she started to change. She was less attentive towards me and always tied up on her phone. She wasn't interested in my day anymore and no longer took the time to proudly show me her latest project. I felt an emotional wall building up between us. It ate at me, but I didn't think much of it because I trusted her completely. She rarely left the house. My job is a hybrid position, so I only need to show up at the office 3 times a week, or when they absolutely need me there in person. So I'm usually home, and she's often home working on her art. The thought of infidelity never even crossed my mind. I'd started to feel neglected though, but I took it in stride. I didn't want to seem whiny, so I kept it to myself. Then one day she asked me for a particularly large sum of money, and I couldn't help myself anymore. I spoke up and asked why she felt like I should keep giving her money when it seemed like I wasn't even worth her attention anymore. I'm afraid to say I got bitter and pointed out that her business couldn't be taking up all her attention since she wasn't getting any orders. This caused us to get into a bit of a shouting match, and we went back and forth for a while. By the end of it, I was consoling her while she was crying and promising to be a better wife with me. Looking back at it, I realized I'd never asked her what she needed so much money for, but I have a pretty good idea now. For a little while after that, she stopped asking for money. I still bought her the occasional gift and took her on dates, but she didn't ask for much herself, and she also did get more attentive. Our love life improved, and she started making an effort to reciprocate my kind gestures. Things seemed to be getting back on track, but I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. Sure, she was more attentive, but it felt forced. All her attempts felt like she was playing a part rather than truly connecting with me. She'd stay with me for a few minutes and then walk out of the room like she'd completed a chore. I tried to tell myself that I was just paranoid, that I was still emotionally sore after our fight. One day, I came home early from work. It was one of those days where I didn't need to come into the office, but we had an important meeting concerning a high-priority project, so I came into work for the morning. After the meeting, I got into my car and drove home, stopping at our favorite bakery to get some donuts that we both loved. I liked to surprise her with small gestures once in a while, so I let myself in quietly, aiming to surprise her with her favorite snack. But what I saw made me sick. She hadn't heard me come in. I could hear her soft laughter coming from the living room where she was lying across the couch, angled slightly away from me. I smiled like a dope while I snuck up on her, hoping to plop the box of donuts on her lap. I was expecting to see her stitching away at a crochet elephant or watching some show on TV. Instead, she was giggling at her phone, and then I saw it. She was on a video call with some guy. And it wasn't just any guy. This was some kid that looked like he could barely be out of college. I froze up where I stood, watching her flirt and laugh with this guy like she was deep in love. The way she used to flirt and laugh with me. She hadn't noticed me yet, so I stood as still as I could and listened in on them. "You like to watch, huh? I knew you would. It looks so good on you." "Don't worry about it. I love seeing you look so good." Then the other guy laughed a bit, and she started laughing too. I should have kept quiet and seen what more I could find out, but I lost it at that point. That was a blatantly flirty laugh. The way she used to laugh when we'd just fallen in love and everything I said was the funniest thing in the world. What the hell is going on here? She nearly screamed and jolted in her seat. She hung up the call in a flash and started the waterworks immediately. "It's not what it looks like." "Are you screwing around behind my back?" "Never. It was just some flirting. He commented on my IG post, and we went into the DMs from there, and things got a bit out of hand, but we've never met physically." She continued to sob heavily, and from there, she went on to explain that she'd been lacking excitement, that she'd meant to turn him down once he moved on to her DMs, but she found herself liking the attention. That's all it was, she kept emphasizing. It was just about excitement and attention, nothing more. She kept repeating that she would never cheat on me. I let her know that entertaining another man's advances was as bad as cheating in my eyes, and she broke down wailing. She nearly had snot trailing down her face as she swore that she'd never talk to him again. I'm ashamed to say I was moved a little. I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded to see their messages. I should have pushed for more details. I should have made an effort to catch her in her lies, but I didn't. I took her words at face value, like a chump, and shifted my focus to how we could save our marriage. For some time after that, things were strained. She started overcompensating, doing her best to make me feel loved, but doubts were already growing in my mind. I regretted not pushing further and finding out if she had told me the truth. It ate at me. I had trouble sleeping now, wondering just how far she'd actually gone with this guy. I had always trusted her implicitly, but she'd shown me she didn't deserve that. Yesterday, on my way home from work, I made the decision that I needed to find out more. It wouldn't work if I kept stewing in doubt like this. So I came with a plan. I'd get her to fall asleep with her phone right beside me, and I'd go through her messages. Admittedly, it wasn't a very complicated plan, and it was easy to pull off. A warm cup of cocoa and an hour of Netflix on the couch together, and she was out like a light. Her head was in my lap, and her phone was on the couch in front of her chest. I reached for it carefully, making sure not to jostle her. We both knew each other's passcodes. I guess it's a holdover from back when we both trusted each other, and she had never really been tech-savvy enough to change it on her own easily. Once I was in, I went straight for her messages. I'd expect that I would need to dig through her chats to find the guy. I'd even checked the donut shop receipt to recall the exact date that I saw her video calling him, just so I'd know how far back to look for their chat log. This was all based on the assumption that she'd been honest and actually stopped chatting with him. Turns out that was all unnecessary. Right at the top of her recent messages was Ryan. I immediately opened it up, and the latest message was from him. It read, "Still watching the movie?" It was sent 15 minutes ago. She'd been chatting with this guy while we cuddled on the couch. I fought to keep my cool. I couldn't confront her yet. I needed to get all the details, compile all the evidence, and get my arguments together. I wasn't going to give her the chance to worm her way out of this again. She's a light sleeper, so I had to act fast. I pulled out my phone and started to record her screen with my camera. I scrolled through the texts, making sure to go at a steady pace so everything would be legible later on. I read as I scrolled, and my stomach felt like ice. Ryan was a college student in his senior year. My wife was buying him all sorts of stuff and spoiling him with my money. She said nothing happened between them, but these texts showed that she'd been lying through her teeth. There were texts of plans to meet up during the day and texts from later the same evening talking about how much fun they had that day. There were also explicit photos they'd sent back and forth. Just looking at them made me want to throw up. But I recorded them too, because I needed every last bit of evidence. I'm typing all of this from my desk at work. She's at home, presumably, or maybe she's with Ryan. I don't know anymore, and I don't think I even care. I just want her out of my house and out of my life. But I don't know how to go about it. I guess that's why I turned to you guys. I'm really hoping you can give me some good suggestions because I need to make sure that I get rid of her in a way that will satisfy me entirely. Well, on the how to get even front, I'd recommend starting off with a solid legal strategy and possibly a good therapist. Both are vital for navigating this dramatic turn of events. And as for your wife, well, OP, I hope she finds a new hobby, preferably one that doesn't involve betraying someone who supported her every step of the way. I'm really sorry you're going through this, OP. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and honesty. Update. I wasn't expecting this to blow up the way it did. I got a lot of advice from you guys on how to handle this. A lot of you called me a simp, and to that I say, that's what happens when you fall in love, especially as young as I did. In the end, I decided to handle this in a way that would make it clear to our friends and family that I wasn't the bad guy here. After all, they'd hear that we split and just come up with stories of their own. Worse would be letting her control the narrative. I'm sure we've all seen it happen. The man is always the bad guy in a divorce, and nobody wants to hear our side. I decided to make sure this wouldn't happen to me, and that everyone close to us would know just how dirty she was doing me. There's no way I was going to give her the chance to make herself the victim in all of this. As casually as I could, I asked if she'd love to throw a small dinner. I'm not the social event type of guy, so I was expecting her to get suspicious and ask a lot of questions, but she just smiled. She loves organizing events and throwing parties. I'd barely even finished talking before she started listing off guests. I just listened along and made sure to add the names of people I wanted to expose her in front of. The night of the dinner, everything was going like it usually would. Both our parents, my brother, and her two sisters were there, as well as a couple of close friends. Everybody was laughing it up and having a nice time. A part of me almost got cold feet because I was going to ruin the mood. But when I saw my wife laughing without a care in the world, it made me think of how she'd laughed and flirted with Ryan and how she had lied to me that she wasn't talking to him anymore. She spent my money on him like some kind of cougar or sugar mommy. After what she'd done to me, I suddenly didn't care anymore. I had a burning desire to make sure she couldn't show her face to these people without feeling shame. After dinner, I stood up and announced that I'd like to make a toast. Everybody went silent, and my wife was looking at me in mild surprise. She didn't look like she knew what was coming. She was just curious. I looked at my wife in the eye and started talking about her passion for art and how happy I was to support her dream. I reminded everyone how I'd spent years of my life slaving away at a job and my own small business to make sure she never needed to worry about a single bill. But apparently, I've been supporting more than just her art. Turns out she's been using my hard-earned money to play sugar mommy to her 20-year-old lover. The room went dead quiet. When I went over this moment in my head, I'd expected I'd have to continue over protests. I'd anticipated her shooting out of her seat, or my mom urging me to sit down, or her dad shouting at me. Instead, everybody was either staring at me or her, and she was sitting in her seat, staring at her plate. I'd never seen her face get so pale. I felt a twinge of satisfaction in that moment. Honestly, the silence unnerved me a bit. I'd prepared for all sorts of interruptions, but not silence. Everyone was waiting for me or her to say something first. She was probably trying to come up with some lie to defend herself, but there was no defense. She was frozen at that moment, but I knew she'd go into damage control if I didn't say anything, so I pushed on. There was no way I was going to give her even the slightest chance. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I'd already pulled up the photos I'd taken of their chat before we sat down to eat. I cleared my throat and started reading the texts out loud. I did my best to keep my voice from shaking out of anger. "You're so much more exciting than him. Lying in bed with him thinking of you." I spared the details of the more graphic texts, but I read enough to give them the full idea. About the explicit photos and texts, the money and gifts she got for him, and how the two of them would slip away for their meetups when I was out at work. I made sure to emphasize that she would use my money that I busted my butt to make, to fund their little trysts. I showed them the pictures of the things she'd bought for him with my money. By this point, I had stopped trying to keep the anger out of my voice. I was done playing it cool. I think the weight of it really sank in when I saw my audience staring daggers at her. She'd taken advantage of me. She'd been living the easy life on my dime, then had the gall to sleep around with another man and spoil him silly with my money. She played me for a fool, and it hurt so bad that I remember I felt like physically hurting her. I came to the end of my speech and looked directly at her, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her head was bent over and she was still white as a ghost. Her whole body was shaking as she cried silently. I didn't even feel the tiniest bit of pity or sympathy for her. She was only sorry she got caught. In fact, it felt good with the way everyone was just staring at her. Before I could ask if she had anything to say, her dad spoke up. "Is it true?" Her dad was usually a pretty chipper guy with a light voice, but his voice was heavy with disappointment now. My wife wouldn't look up. She just nodded slightly. "Unbelievable," her mother muttered. I was surprised that she just stood up and walked out of the room, shaking her head. I thought she'd want to have words with her daughter. Her husband looked at me, then glared at his daughter. I think he wanted to say something, but changed his mind and followed his wife out of the house. It wasn't long before the rest of the guests started to leave. No one wanted to stay long after hearing that news. Her sisters had berated her for a while my brother took me aside to the kitchen and checked if I was okay. It felt so good to finally have people on my side. I told my brother about how tough it had been, but I let him know that I'd pull through. He let me know he was always there for me if I needed him, and he eventually left without even shooting a look at my wife. When it was just me and my wife, I didn't let her get a word in. I filed for divorce already. You'll receive the papers shortly. I've blocked your number already. If you want to get in touch with me, I've left my lawyer's number on the nightstand. I hope Ryan knows some cheap lawyers because I've cut you off completely. Have a nice life with him." She started to reply, but I have no idea what she said. I didn't want to hear a word she had to say. I just walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her tears. Her parents tried to beg on her behalf a few times after the dinner party, but after 2 or 3 tries, they realized they wouldn't get through to me. They weren't aggressive either because they knew they were trying their luck after what she had done. I let them know the last time they called that the divorce was going to happen, and I'd advised that their daughter made it easy for me. And yes, the divorce went perfectly in my favor, and money she should have made in alimony, I recouped as compensation for all my funds that she spent to fuel her affair. After so long, she definitely didn't get the house either, and she didn't even fight for her own car. The humiliation and insufficient financial power for a good lawyer put her in line, and she made things easy. I'm glad it's over, and I'm glad I got my revenge. Honestly, her cheating still hurts, but it hurts less every time I remember that dinner party. I have to hand it to you, OP. Nothing screams, "I'm done with this mess," like airing dirty laundry in front of the entire social circle. In the end, it sounds like you turned a devastating situation into a personal victory. The divorce went your way, her humiliation was complete, and you got to enjoy the sweet, bitter taste of justice. You must be full after that one. Well done. What would you have done? Share your thoughts with us. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon.